Only a smart detective can solve this shocking case. This story takes us to the quiet town of Dombivli, where a promising young woman named Snehal lived with her family. What seemed like a regular, happy life took a dark turn, leaving behind a trail of questions and heartbreak. If you enjoy diving into intriguing Reddit stories that unravel unexpected twists and turns, make sure to like this post and hit subscribe for more gripping tales like this one. Today, we'll uncover the puzzling events surrounding Snehal's tragic fate, the shocking revelations, and the unanswered questions that still linger after all these years. Stay tuned as we piece together this chilling story. Today, we delve into a tragic and chilling case that unfolds in the bustling suburb of Dombivli, Mumbai on the afternoon of July 19, 2007. It was around 4:30 p.m. when Kalpana Gaware, a dedicated school teacher and mother of 2 daughters, returned home after completing her daily responsibilities. Her routine typically involved wrapping up work after ensuring her children had safely returned from school. However, that day felt different. As she approached the house, something unusual caught her attention. A lock secured the front gate, and lying nearby was a single slipper belonging to her 21-year-old daughter, Snehal Gaware. Puzzled by the scene, Kalpana entered the house and found herself in the spacious living room, a space where the family often gathered to share meals and watch television. A half-filled glass of water sat conspicuously on the table, an odd detail that immediately stood out. With growing unease, Kalpana began calling out for Snehal, hoping to find her somewhere in the house. Her search extended from room to room and eventually to the rooftop, but Snehal was nowhere to be found. The situation was alarming. Snehal was supposed to stay home all day as she was nursing a foot injury sustained during a recent trekking trip with friends. The unanswered calls and the abandoned slipper deepened Kalpana's concern. Growing more anxious, Kalpana attempted to contact Snehal by phone, only to find that her mobile was switched off. This was entirely out of character for her daughter. Snehal had never left the house without informing her parents, let alone without locking the door. Kalpana's worry turned into dread as she checked Snehal's message inbox for any clues. Her heart sank further when she discovered a blank message sent by Snehal at exactly 3:28 p.m. The strange emptiness of the message offered no insight, but instead added another layer of mystery to her daughter's unexplained absence. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Kalpana waited for any sign of her daughter. Despite making calls and searching the house repeatedly, there was no trace of Snehal. Nearly an hour and a half passed without any progress. The tension in the household grew heavier with each passing minute. Then, at 7 p.m., Hindurav Gaware, Snehal's father and a bank employee, arrived home from work. Hindurav's job occasionally required him to work late, but nothing could have prepared him for the grim news that awaited him that evening. As Hindurav walked into the house, Kalpana quickly relayed the troubling events of the afternoon. She described her return at 4:30 p.m., the locked gate, the abandoned slipper, and Snehal's disappearance. The unusual details, Snehal's injury, the blank message, and her unreachable phone, painted a worrying picture. Hindurav immediately joined Kalpana in her frantic attempts to locate their daughter, reaching out to neighbors and Snehal's friends in the hope of finding someone who might have seen her. The sense of dread and helplessness intensified as the hours passed with no leads. Snehal's absence defied logic, and the unusual circumstances surrounding her disappearance left the family in a state of panic. What had happened to Snehal Gaware on that fateful afternoon? The story, steeped in mystery and heartbreak, was only beginning to unravel. Little did the family know their desperate search would soon lead to revelations far more harrowing than they could ever imagine. Since that evening, there was still no trace of Snehal. The locked gate and the lone sandal at the entrance painted an unsettling picture, deepening her parents' anxiety. Hindurav Gaware, growing increasingly restless, decided to act. He began by contacting Snehal's close friends, hoping someone might have seen or heard from her. To his dismay, none of them had any information about her whereabouts. Desperation drove Hindurav and Kalpana to gather a few neighbors, and together they scoured the area around their house, but their efforts yielded nothing. The night seemed endless, and their hearts grew heavier with each passing moment. By 10:30 p.m., having exhausted all other options, Hindurav and Kalpana went to the Dombivli police station to file a missing persons report. They shared every detail they could think of: the locked gate, the abandoned sandal, the blank message on her phone. The police assured them they would begin their search immediately, but the waiting was agonizing. The couple returned home, calling relatives once again in a final attempt to uncover some clue, but no one could provide any answers. Their home, once a haven of warmth and familiarity, now felt cold and full of despair. Friends and colleagues began arriving to offer support. Kalpana's schoolteacher and Hindurav's co-workers joined the family, trying to reassure them that Snehal would be found. They urged the couple to rest, reminding them that the police were now involved in working on the case. But how could any parent sleep when their child had been missing for hours? Despite their exhaustion, Kalpana and Hindurav refused to give in to sleep. By 2:30 a.m., however, overwhelmed by the emotional toll, Hindurav and a friend lay down in one room while Kalpana and her friend rested in another. The night passed in a haze of restless slumber. At around 5:30 a.m., Kalpana stirred awake. Groggy, but unable to rest further, she began tidying up the room. As she straightened the blanket draped over the edge of her bed, an inexplicable chill ran down her spine. She pulled at the blanket, and a loud, gut-wrenching scream escaped her lips. The piercing cry shattered the quiet morning, jolting everyone in the house awake. Hindurav and his friend rushed into the room. Inside, they discovered the lifeless body of Snehal Gawara. A wave of anguish and disbelief swept through the household. Kalpana collapsed, overcome with shock, as loud cries filled the air. Hindurav, paralyzed by grief, could hardly process the horrific reality. Their worst fears had come true in the most unimaginable way. What was once a mystery now stood before them, unraveling into a tragedy that would leave an indelible scar on their lives. For nearly 12 agonizing hours, Snehal's parents had searched tirelessly for their daughter, fearing the worst, but clinging to hope. Little did they know that Snehal had been in the house all along, concealed within the very bed on which her mother and her friend had slept that night. The gruesome discovery left them shaken to their core. Snehal's body was found bound cruelly, with her hands and feet tied behind her and a cloth stuffed in her mouth. Her lifeless form suggested she had been subjected to unimaginable suffering before succumbing to her tragic fate. Despite the heart-wrenching scene before them, the distraught parents rushed Snehal to the hospital, praying for a miracle. However, their worst fears were confirmed when the doctor, after a quick examination, pronounced her dead. The devastating news left the family shattered, and even the police reached out to Hiran, who agreed to cooperate with the investigation. During questioning, Hiran revealed the details of their relationship, which had begun in 2004 when they met in college. Initially just friends, their bond deepened over time, and by August 2005, they had fallen in love. According to Hiran, their relationship was not a secret. He often visited Snehal's home, and her mother was aware of their bond. However, her father, Hindurav, remained in the dark about their romance, as Snehal chose to keep it from him. While the police questioned Hiran, another team worked on tracing Snehal's missing mobile phone through its unique IMEI number. Unfortunately, the device had been switched off, making its location impossible to track in real time. Meanwhile, Hiran provided additional insights into their relationship dynamics. He admitted that about a week before Snehal's murder, they had a disagreement that left them at odds. The argument arose when Hiran attended a party with friends without informing Snehal, one of whom was a person she strongly disliked. This incident had upset Snehal, and despite Hiran's efforts to reconcile with her over the phone, she had remained distant. Hiran explained that after the argument, they had not spoken much and tensions had lingered between them. He also mentioned a technical issue with his own mobile phone, stating that its battery had malfunctioned 2 days before Snehal's murder, making it difficult for him to communicate during that period. The police noted this detail but were unsure of its relevance to the case at that moment. As the investigation deepened, the police began scrutinizing Hiran's alibi and actions during the days leading up to Snehal's death. While Hiran appeared forthcoming, the lingering argument and his proximity to Snehal's life placed him under the microscope. The officers remained cautious, knowing that personal motives often played a significant role in such crimes. Hiran's relationship with Snehal, his regular visits to her home, and the tension between them were all potential leads that demanded further exploration. At the same time, the police broadened their inquiry, looking for anyone else who might have had access to the Gawara household or harbored a motive to harm Snehal. While Hiran's story provided some clarity about her personal life, the absence of concrete evidence or a clear suspect left the investigation hanging in uncertainty. Each new piece of information raised more questions, pushing the officers to delve deeper into the web of Snehal's relationships and the events surrounding her tragic death. Haran explained to the police that his phone had been malfunctioning for some time. It would either switch off suddenly or the battery would drain within minutes, forcing him to keep it turned off for extended periods. On July 19th, the day of Snehal's disappearance, his phone was also off. When the police questioned him about his whereabouts, Hiran stated that he had been at work. He mentioned he was employed at Voltus and had spent the day at the office. However, the police were not entirely convinced by his account and decided to verify his claims. To validate Haran's statement, the police visited his workplace and spoke to 3 of his colleagues who confirmed that Haran had been present in the office from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. on July 19th. While this initially seemed to support Haran's alibi, further investigation raised doubts. When the police requested the attendance register to corroborate his presence officially, they discovered that the page for July 19th was missing. This unusual gap in the records made the police suspect Haran's involvement in Snehal's murder. Despite the missing attendance page, Haran's colleagues continued to vouch for him, insisting that he had been with them throughout the day. However, the combination of Haran's phone being switched off and the critical attendance record disappearing was too coincidental to ignore. The police conducted a thorough search for the missing page, enlisting the help of company staff, but it was nowhere to be found. With these discrepancies, Haran remained a person of interest, though the lack of concrete evidence kept the investigation wide open. As the police delved deeper into the case, they turned their attention back to Snehal's family, hoping to uncover additional clues. What emerged painted a more complicated picture of the Gaware household. While the family appeared harmonious to outsiders, underlying tensions and conflicts told a different story. The police discovered that Snehal's elder sister, Sheetal, had previously filed a complaint against their father, Hindurav. This shocking revelation stemmed from an incident where Hindurav had... Moreover, it became evident that Hindurav and Kalpana's marriage was far from stable. Frequent arguments between the couple often escalated into heated confrontations. Hindurav harbored suspicions that Kalpana was having an affair, adding further strain to their already turbulent relationship. This led the police to question whether these internal family issues might have played a role in Snehal's tragic demise. The investigation took another twist with the introduction of a new character, Anil Jawalekar, a relative of Hindurav. Hindurav believed that Kalpana was involved with Anil, fueling his distrust and intensifying the discord within the household. Anil's presence in the narrative raised additional questions about his relationship with Kalpana and whether it had any connection to the crime. While these revelations provided critical context about the Gaware family dynamics, they also broadened the scope of the investigation. With Haran's alibi under scrutiny, the missing attendance records, and the complexities within Snehal's family, the case became increasingly tangled. The police were left to navigate a maze of personal relationships, conflicting testimonies, and circumstantial evidence, all while racing against time to uncover the truth behind Snehal's murder. Hindurav's constant anger and suspicion had created an environment of tension at home. This was exacerbated by the ongoing conflict between him and his wife, Kalpana, with both daughters, Snehal and Sheetal, siding with their mother. The already fragile family dynamics were further complicated when Anil Jawalekar's name surfaced in the investigation. The police, suspecting foul play within the household, brought Anil in for questioning. This expanded the list of suspects to 4 individuals: Snehal's father, Hindu Rao, her mother Kalpana, her boyfriend Hiran, and now Anil. Sheetal, however, was not considered a suspect as she had been living in London for an extended period. The police began formulating theories around these 4 suspects. Their first hypothesis centered on Hindu Rao. Given the findings of the post-mortem report, which suggested no signs of physical coercion, the police believed the crime could have been committed by someone close to Snehal. They speculated that Hindu Rao's well-documented anger issues, possibly fueled by knowledge of his wife's alleged affair with Anil, might have driven him to kill his daughter. Snehal and Sheetal's unwavering support for their mother might have further strained his relationship with Snehal, especially if he had also discovered her romantic relationship with Haran. Another theory revolved around Kalpana and Anil. The police hypothesized that Snehal might have uncovered an affair between her mother and Anil. Fearing exposure, Kalpana and Anil could have conspired to silence her permanently. They theorized that after killing Snehal, they placed her body in the box bed and staged her disappearance to mislead the investigation. Kalpana's outward display of worry and her active role in searching for Snehal might have been part of a calculated effort to divert suspicion away from herself. The third line of inquiry involved Hiran. His prior argument with Snehal over a party and the involvement of a friend Snehal disapproved of added another layer of complexity. The police speculated that Hiran might have harbored resentment following their dispute. According to this theory, Hiran could have waited for the right moment to confront Snehal. On July 19th, taking advantage of her being home alone, he could have entered the house under the guise of reconciliation and killed her. The missing attendance record from Hiran's workplace for that day further fueled this suspicion, as it created a gap in his alibi. Despite these theories, no concrete evidence pointed definitively to any of the suspects. The lack of physical evidence linking any of them to the crime left the investigation at an impasse. The police considered all possibilities but struggled to move beyond conjecture. Each suspect's potential motive was plausible, but without direct proof, they were left grasping at straws. The case became increasingly convoluted as every angle seemed equally likely, yet impossible to confirm. As the investigation dragged on, the police decided to take a new approach. On July 2, 2008, nearly a year after Snehal's murder, they resolved to conduct polygraph tests on all four suspects. They hoped this would provide clarity and eliminate at least some of the possibilities. However, even the prospect of polygraph testing underscored how little progress had been made in identifying the killer, leaving the family and investigators desperate for answers. This decision marked a turning point in the case. While the polygraph tests were not admissible as conclusive evidence in court, they could offer valuable insights into the suspect's behavior and honesty. The police were determined to leave no stone unturned, even as the trail grew colder with each passing day. The polygraph tests marked a critical juncture in the investigation as the results varied across the suspects. Both Anil and Kalpana were found to be truthful with their responses showing no signs of deception. Their test results gave the police no grounds to suspect their involvement in Snehal's murder. However, the same could not be said for Hindu Rao and Hiran. Hindu Rao's responses during the test raised concerns due to fluctuations in his heartbeat and blood pressure, suggesting potential dishonesty. Hiran, on the other hand, stumbled during critical questioning, particularly when asked directly about his presence at the scene or his involvement in Snehal's murder. His inability to provide clear and confident answers led the police to suspect him further. Despite these suspicions, the polygraph results were not sufficient to conclusively implicate either Hindu Rao or Hiran. As a result, the police decided to escalate the investigation, handing the case over to the crime branch for deeper scrutiny. Meanwhile, Hiran, who had been planning to move to the United States for a management course, received his visa approval. With no concrete evidence tying him to the crime and no official charges filed, he was free to leave the country. On July 30th, 2008, Hiran departed for the U.S., leaving behind a case that remained shrouded in unanswered questions and growing frustration for the investigators. The police's inability to solve the case prompted them to file an appeal in court, seeking permission to close the investigation. However, the court rejected this appeal, emphasizing the need for continued efforts to uncover the truth. The unresolved case dragged on as the years passed, with little progress made. By 2010, the investigation seemed to have reached a dead end. However, a significant development occurred when Hiran returned to India on April 7, 2010, following the death of his father. After performing the last rites and completing familial obligations, Hiran made an unexpected move that surprised both the police and the public. In a bold and unusual step, Hiran approached the court himself. He filed an application requesting to undergo a narcoanalysis test, expressing his willingness to cooperate fully with the investigation if he was still under suspicion. His application raised eyebrows as it suggested either a deep confidence in his innocence or a calculated attempt to clear his name definitively. Following this, the police arrested Hiran on April 20th, 2010 and placed him in custody for questioning. Over the course of 7 days, investigators interrogated him intensively, hoping to uncover new leads or extract a confession. Despite the extensive questioning and the time spent in police custody, the authorities found no new evidence linking Hiran to the crime. This lack of progress forced them to move Hiran into judicial custody, a measure ordered by the magistrate. In judicial custody, Hiran remained in jail for about a month, with the investigation showing little to no advancement during this period. The case continued to stagnate, leaving the police with more questions than answers, and the family of Snehal with an enduring sense of loss and injustice. Hiran's time in judicial custody did not yield any breakthroughs. The stalemate persisted, and the case that had once seemed poised for resolution slipped further into ambiguity. The lack of concrete evidence against any of the suspects, combined with the passage of time, eroded public confidence in the investigation. By the end of Hiran's month-long stay in jail, the case was no closer to being solved, further complicating an already convoluted and tragic story. The investigation into Snehal's murder faced a critical challenge with two significant obstacles. Hiran's phone had been switched off on the day of the crime, making it impossible to track his location, and his attendance record for that day was mysteriously missing. These two factors continued to cast suspicion on Hiran, yet the lack of concrete evidence meant the case against him remained weak. On May 26th, after spending a month in jail, Hiran was released on bail. Upon his release, he made an unexpected move by filing an appeal in court to withdraw his earlier consent for a narcotic analysis test. This decision, likely fueled by frustration and indignation after his prolonged incarceration without sufficient evidence, underscored the emotional toll the investigation had taken on him. Under Indian law, no one can be compelled to undergo such a test, and Hiran exercised his legal right to refuse further questioning through this method. Meanwhile, the investigation took a new turn when Snehal's missing phone was traced using its IMEI number. The phone was found in the possession of a stationery shop owner, Mansukh Shivaji Patil, who revealed that he had acquired it from an unknown individual a month earlier. Mansukh explained that the phone had been picked up off the street before it eventually reached him. To assist the police, Mansukh provided a sketch of the man who had sold the phone. However, when the sketch was shared with Snehal's family, neighbors, and others in the area, no one could identify the individual. This lead, which initially seemed promising, ultimately led to another dead end, adding to the growing list of unresolved questions surrounding the case. 16 years have now passed since Snehal's murder. Each year, the case file is revisited in the hope of uncovering new evidence or identifying a suspect. However, every review ends with the same conclusion: no progress, no breakthroughs, and no closure for Snehal's family. The sketch of the unidentified man remains a lingering mystery, much like the other fragments of the case that refuse to coalesce into a clear narrative. Despite the repeated appeals to close the investigation, the court has consistently denied permission, keeping the case alive but stagnant. This continued effort reflects both the persistent quest for justice and the painful inability to provide answers to those who have waited so long. The tragic story of 21-year-old Snehal remains an unresolved chapter in the annals of crime. Her family, friends, and community have endured years of anguish with no resolution in sight. As the investigation reaches its 16th year, the absence of new suspects, evidence, or witnesses only deepens the wounds left by her untimely death. What began as a promising young life full of potential ended in a mystery that still haunts everyone involved. The questions surrounding Snehal's death remain unanswered, a chilling reminder of the complexities and heartbreak of justice delayed. The case of Snehal Gawar serves as a chilling reminder of the hidden struggles that can exist behind closed doors, even within the most seemingly ordinary families. It highlights the devastating consequences of secrets, betrayal, and unresolved tension. Though justice remains elusive, the story of Snehal urges us to look closer at the relationships and events around us, as they may hold answers to even the darkest mysteries. Thank you for reading this story. If you found it thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might appreciate it. Your support helps us continue to bring you more stories that intrigue and challenge. Stay aware, stay curious, and we'll see you next time with another captivating tale.